Welcome to Hartman Math. This is lesson 613, where we're graphing both the sine and cosine functions. And at the same time, we're going to have to figure out which graph we're looking at, what is the shape, what do the key points look like. Example number 1 is graphing f of x equals -2 times the cosine of x, where we know the period is going to be 360 degrees, and we also set up our scale to be quadrant angles 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees, 360 degrees. That's as far as we need to go. We don't need to go there. We have a midline. We'll get to that in a moment. But the cosine graph, we know typically, in reference to the midline, is going to start how? On, above, below? Just cosine is going to start above the midline. And this is a parent function with no vertical translation, so the midline is going to be the x-axis. Now, normally it's going to start above, but we do have a negative a value causing a reflection. So instead of starting above, it's going to flip below. How far below? 2 below our midline, which is y equals 0. So 2 below the midline is where we're going to start. And if we're below, the next one has to be on. And then the next one has to be above by 2. So 2 above, then back to on. And we finish where we started, which was below. Careful with the shape. Shape here. Bend, bend. Amplitude 2, a distance of 2. And there's our shape. Make sure we have the bend to the shape. Example number 2, graph f of x equals 2 sine of x plus 1. Set the scale. Period is 360 degrees. What about the midline? What do you think the equation of the midline is going to be? I think it's going to be y equals 1. The vertical shift or translation of 1. So midline y equals 1. Probably be a good idea to draw that in. Now the sine graph, definitely, it's going to start on that midline. The next point is typically going to be above, 2 above. So at 90 degrees, we're going to be 2 above, 90 degrees, comma 3. Then back to the midline. Below the midline, 2 below the midline. Back to the midline. So shape, shape, amplitude, distance of 2, distance of 2. Example number 3. f of x equals cosine -2. Set the scale. Period is 360 degrees. That's how long it's going to take to complete a full cycle of our cosine function. It's the equation of the midline. Y equals -2, as this is being added or subtracted. In this case, subtracted. So that's our vertical shift. Y equals -2. Let's draw it. Cosine function, does it start on the midline, above it, below it? How does it start? Cosine starts above. There's an invisible 1 in front, so we're going to start 1 above. The next one has to be on it. Then we go below. Back to on it. Finish where we started, which was above. Curve, curve, curve. It's a wave. Amplitude is a distance of 1. And that's that graph. Example number 4, we have an existing graph and we want to come up with the function, the equation that writes that graph in function form. We're going to have to decide if it's a sine graph or if it's a cosine graph. And we're going to have to figure out what our A is and our D is. I think D might be the best way for us to start, so let's start there. Maybe we could draw in the average value line, or the midline that cuts this shape in half. And I think if we draw it, it's going to be right here, where we've got half above, half below. That's our midline. So that's our D, and then it kind of also guides us to which one we should go with. Which one starts on the midline? That would be the sine function. So we're picking this one. How far above or below does it go? It's going to be a half. Last thing, is A going to be positive or negative? Sine typically starts going up. This one did not. So that tells us what about the A value? It tells us it was negative to cause a reflection to start by going below. So A is negative, and it's a half. So negative a half, sine x plus a midline of 2, so plus 2. That is our function. That is our equation. That's going to be it for today. That's actually the end of the course. So we're probably not going to see you next time, unless it's in a subsequent class. Thank you for coming along on the voyage.